Palestinians? Okay, Benny, I'd like to go to you. Let's do a hypothetical here. I mean, we know the General Assembly, the vast majority of the countries of the General Assembly support the Palestinian bid for changing its status at the United Nations. We know that the United States will veto it. But in a hypothetical case, how would this change once the United Nations takes the vote? It will be in favor of the Palestinians. How will this change Israel's position, or will it not change it at all?
Okay, let me say something first about what was said until now.
All right.
The Hamas says clearly it wants to destroy Israel. That's what it says in its founding charter. That is still the constitution of that organization. And Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the PLO, says he will not recognize Israel as a Jewish state. These are facts. You can say whatever you like. People can try and sell you propaganda, but these are the facts. As to what's going to happen on the ground, I don't know. I don't know how any vote by the United Nations General Assembly will change the situation on the ground. What it probably will do is it will incite the masses of Palestinians to violence, and masses of Arabs outside of Palestine to support what they see as the Palestinian cause. And we've seen some of that already in the streets of Cairo when they vandalized the Israeli embassy. I assume these sort of things are going to happen in the Arab world, and in Palestine itself, in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, there will be massive demonstrations, attempts to breach Israeli settlements. All of this will lead to violence, and where that goes, where we go from there, I have no idea.
Well, I think the violence has already started. I mean, if we look at the Arab Spring here, Diana, it's very interesting here. I mean, the U.S. position, because the United States again is going to look very lonely on the international stage when you look at world opinion. And if we look at the Arab Spring, what's going on? I mean, the United States will come out and say it supports the freedom of some people, but it will not do that for the Palestinians, apparently, and it doesn't do it for the people in Bahrain also, by the way. I mean, how does this change the dynamic, or does it at all, because the position of the United States in the greater Middle East, the Arab world, is so poor anyway?
Well, this is where I think the Palestinian leadership needs to take a good hard look at itself and learn some lessons, which is that for the past 20 years, the focus has been entirely on changing opinion in Washington and somehow getting an American president to support Palestinian statehood and support Palestinian freedom. That's not going to happen, and I think that they should begin to recognize that that's not going to happen. And instead, I think that the Palestinian leadership should start turning its direction to a completely different direction and start looking towards other countries around the world to isolate Israel for its ongoing human rights abuses, its ongoing violations of international law, and the fact that Israel continues to build settlements in the West Bank. These are considered war crimes under the statute of the International Criminal Court. So one thing that I think that might be positive and come out of this is that if Palestine gets to sign on to the International Criminal Court, then I think it's important for Palestine to then start taking Israel to court for the fact that these settlements continue. For as much as an Israeli leader may say that they support a Palestinian state, one thing that they're not willing to do is to actually halt the establishment of colonies, of settlements, and they're not willing to evacuate the settlers who've been residing there illegally on Palestinian land for more than 4 decades.
Benny, what can be Tel Aviv's moving forward their policy in recognizing a second state, as you write about? I mean, what does it have to do? I mean, when the international community is saying that the occupation must come to an end, a lot of Israelis want to end the occupation as well. How can it be done in light of this vote? Or is this vote just symbolism, as so many people in Israel and Washington say?
I believe that the occupation should end, and I think you're being unfair to the Americans. The Americans have supported Palestinian statehood and continue to support Palestinian statehood. The problem for the Palestinians is that the Americans also support Israeli statehood, and this they find anathema. One perhaps advantage which might arise from a declaration of Palestinian statehood and acceptance by the United Nations of Palestinian statehood would be that the Palestinians could also be taken to court in the International Court in The Hague, say for the promotion of terrorism and the orchestration of terrorism by people in the Gaza Strip and maybe in the West Bank as well. So I have a feeling this may be a two-edged sword.
Well, it's interesting, Diana. That's I was going to ask something about that earlier.
Israel's also, I hope that Israel's also taken to the International Criminal Court, particularly for its actions over Gaza and the killing of over 1,400 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, half of which were children. So I certainly hope that we begin to take this to an international arena, and I can assure the Israelis that on this level the Palestinians will win, because international law is on the side of the Palestinian cause. It's Israel that has been in violation of international law, not the Palestinians.
Go ahead, Benny.
I'm not so sure.
Go ahead.
I'm not so sure that
You're a historian,
I'm not sure only
I'm a lawyer.
Israelis have been in. Yes, but I know a little more about the past, apparently. I don't think the Israelis have been in violation of international law more than the Palestinians. But the history tells us a different story. The problem is that the Palestinians have been offered a two-state solution, a compromise, since 1937. In 1937, 1947, 1978, 2000 and 2008, when Ehud Olmert offered it again, a two-state solution to the Palestinians under Abbas, and the Palestinians have always said no. The problem is that this action of going to the United Nations
I think that the Palestine Papers have refuted that, Mr. Morris.
The Palestine Papers say nothing. They're a selection of documents from God knows where. They're not important. We don't really know where the Palestinians stand. What we do know is when Olmert put a package on the table, Abbas said no, the same as when Bill Clinton and Ehud Barak put the package on the table, Yasser Arafat said no. That we know.
Okay, Diana.
Those are the facts.
So under that package,
somebody
Mr.
said in a particular conversation.
Go ahead, Diana.
So under that package, well, first of all, I want to pose a question to Mr. Morris, which is that let's assume we can go back to the partition plan now. Would you accept the partition plan now? In other words, would you accept that your state be comprised of less than 55% of what it is now?
Are you talking about the 1947 partition plan or the 2000?
Yes,
You're talking about the 2000 partition plan.
I'm asking you about the 1947. I'm asking you about the 1947
I understand what you're saying.
Would you now
let me respond.
roll back
let me respond.
the clock
let me respond.
and actually...
Let me
yes,
respond.
Please.
Let me respond. I don't think I would roll back, no, because I think history doesn't allow peoples to renege on their mistakes. In other words, the Palestinians in 47 should have accepted the partition plan as the Jews did. They said no, and you lose. When you go to war against an internationally sponsored settlement and you lose the war, then you can't say, well, now I want to go back to the status quo ante. That doesn't happen in history. The fact is that the situation is that
Mr. Morris,
Israel is in possession.
You would not agree to give up more
country. You're not letting me finish.
Go ahead, finish. Go ahead, Benny, finish up. Go ahead.
You're not. What happened after 48 is that Israel retained 78% of Palestine, and the Arabs, not the Palestinians, were in the retention of about 22%. And that essentially is the 67 border.
So for fairness, let's go 50-50.
Which the international community. That's what the international community supports.
So let's
incidentally, and most Israelis support.
Let's go, Diana.
Most Israelis support the 67 border.
Right. Diana, go ahead.
My point in all of this, Peter, is that it's very well and good for people to now, in the year 2011, talk about what the Palestinians should have done in 1947. But if we actually look back to what happened in history, if now Benny Morris is in that very same position, he would not agree to give up any more of the territory that Israel controls. Even already, he's not willing to give up the territory that Israel controls in terms of the 67 borders. So I think it's fictitious to start talking about the offers that Palestinians turned down, and I think we should instead start looking towards the future. And the future is, if the Israelis want to have peace, they have to begin to recognize the Palestinians as equals. And this is something that no Israeli leader has committed himself to, whether it's under the guise of two states or one state. All that I want is to be treated as an equal, and all that Benny Morris and all of the other Israeli establishment want is to continue to subjugate me. Herein lies the problem.
Benny, I mean, what?
I don't belong to the Israeli.
Go ahead.
I don't belong to this. I don't belong to the Israeli establishment. My historical works show that quite well. What I say is that the Palestinians should act rationally and reasonably,
Mr. Morris?
and accept equal rights and have a two-state solution. So long as they refuse a two-state solution and want all of Palestine, there will be no settlement, no peace, only violence.
Diana, go ahead.
I think that Palestinians have already accepted the two-state solution. It's that Israel hasn't accepted
No, they
it.
haven't.
The fact that just last month alone we saw more than 6,200 housing units being established. Just last month alone, we saw more than 6,200 housing units being established in the West Bank. This is clear indication that Israel doesn't want to have a two-state solution, but instead it wants to create Bantustans for the Palestinians. And this is something that no Palestinian leader, including the likes of Mahmoud Abbas, is going to accept, unfortunately.
Benny.
I've always opposed the settlement enterprise. I continue to oppose the settlement enterprise as an obstacle to peace. It is an obstacle to peace, but it's not the major obstacle to peace. The major obstacle to peace is the Palestinian desire to wipe Israel off the map. This is the problem.
Okay. All right, Diana, I'm going to give you the last word. Diana, what is this going to do? Is this going to isolate Israel more? And if it isolates Israel more, doesn't that make Israel just put its back up against the wall? We don't go anywhere here. Go ahead.
I certainly hope it does isolate Israel, and I certainly hope that spawning from this, we begin to see boycotts of Israel, we begin to see sanctions imposed on Israel, and we begin to see more and more international activity in an international legal arena rather than through this farcical negotiations that have taken place. It's time for Israel to be held accountable, and I hope it certainly is after this UN session. Okay,
Benny, I'm going to give you the last word. 20 seconds. Go ahead.
I really wish that the Palestinians would return to the negotiating table, to which they've been invited repeatedly, and actually do so seriously, in good faith, and negotiate a two-state solution. They don't want to do that. There won't be any settlement. The Palestinians will continue to suffer.
All right, we'll see what happens next week. Many thanks to my guests today in Toronto and in Bet Shemesh, and thanks to our viewers for